Welcome to video number 3 in Abuse and Neglect. At the end of video 2, I asked the question at the bottom of the slide, is poverty an excuse for neglect? So let's begin there. In the eyes of the law, poverty is not an excuse for neglect. It's important to understand the role of the people who intervene when we report abuse and neglect. Except in extraordinarily bad cases, we don't typically see the police get involved. Typically, we see social workers get involved. And they go in and they investigate. And as I said earlier, perhaps a better way is to say that they assess. They aren't just there to determine whether abuse or neglect have occurred, but why. And when they want that, or the reason they want to know why is so they can know how to intervene. If, for example, they come across a situation where a parent is doing their utmost to provide for their child, but poverty is a big barrier, the social worker is charged with the responsibility of using resources to help that parent meet the needs of their child better. For example, they might help them with food vouchers in some areas, or with helping them to access food programs. They might help them with funding or access to childcare, or they might help them to get advanced education so that they can find a job that pays better. So they're going to usually start off with those types of interventions. If we didn't report that parent for neglecting their children, those resources might never get delivered. And not only would the parent pay the price, but more importantly, of course, the children would stay in poverty for an extended period of time. So poverty is not an excuse for neglect. When you are reporting abuse and neglect, you aren't doing it as a malicious or angry act. You're doing it so that you can make things better. It's not about getting somebody in trouble or trying to get their children taken away from them. In fact, that's rare and it's a very advanced step. So it usually only happens in the most extreme cases or when more incremental approaches haven't worked. You're simply engaging the system to go and provide for that child. And often that is best done by providing for the entire family. I want to add another type of abuse. And this new type of abuse is sort of gradually becoming better understood. It's not dealt with in the piece of legislation we're going to talk about later on per se. But it is an area that's receiving more focus, and that is the abuse of elders or senior citizens. And this can happen in two ways. Sometimes we see it when professionals who have the responsibility for caring for elders act abusively, and we also see it in situations where adult children are responsible for their parents, and they may become abusive toward them. So all of the other types of abuse, physical, sexual, emotional, and neglect, apply here as well. And yes, sexual abuse does happen to seniors. But we also can talk about a different type of abuse that we don't typically see happening to children. Of course, children are not financially very well off for the most part. But senior citizens often do have some money. And so it's not uncommon for people to defraud or embezzle or steal or misuse or even just keep careless records for the individuals that they're responsible for. And those all constitute this other type of abuse called financial abuse. So while there isn't specifically a term in the Community and Family and Child Service Act that we're going to talk about later on called financial abuse, there are legal statutes that deal with this under the Criminal Code of Canada. They may not call it financial abuse, they may call it theft or fraud, but we as a common thing within our careers may hear people talk about financial abuse, and that's what we mean. So what isn't abuse? In question 5 of video number 1, I asked you, where is the line drawn? Are parents and teachers allowed to have consequences? Are they allowed to raise their voice to their children? Is it okay at times to put your child outside of a space or to lock them away or to spank them? And these are common questions. The answer I'll give you in a minute, it's important to understand, evolves all of the time. And you'll hear why later on as we talk about something case law. As our society's values change, the law sometimes changes as well. But at this time, the law really works hard to try and protect the rights of parents and to some extent of people like teachers, nurses, daycare operators, to do what they think is right, provided that it is safe. And that's the key word. So you may not like what somebody is doing, you may strongly disagree with their practice, and you may be even within your ethical role to go and work with them to advocate for something better or to try and improve their practice. but you wouldn't necessarily report something just because you disagreed with it. You'd only report it if you felt that it was beyond the level of safety, if it got into any of the definitions that we've been talking about regarding abuse. If something is safe, even if it's a consequence, if it's logical or natural, it is not considered abuse. Expressing disapproval of a choice or a behavior is also not considered abuse. We are allowed to tell people we disagree with them or that we are not going to participate or facilitate something if we feel that it is a dangerous thing for them to do. We can tell people that something they did will have a cost down the road, or even apply that cost again if it's safe, natural, or logical. Really important to understand that. Neither is it abuse for us to allow a client to engage in an activity which might involve risk. And you might recall that we talked about a concept called dignity of risk. What I'd like you to do is pause this video, or not pause, end this video, and search using Google Carolyn Ellison and dignity of risk. And by the way, those quotation marks will matter. Then answer these questions. After taking a look at the reading, put them in your journal. What is our role in cases where a client wants to engage in risky behavior? And what is meant by the term duty of care? Pause, and in video number 4, we'll address some of those things as well as in our discussion, and we'll continue on with this slide.